Okay. Basically, continuing from the last post, I was dealing with temples or houses like bathhouses or whatever, different centers that were used as a way to receive sex. Now, from the temple's perspective, they dealt with sexual healing, whereas, when you deal with this bathhouse and all of that stuff, it's not the same thing. And I'm sure you all realize that. Those are just some jokers getting their rocks off. Okay? All right? Away from women. And here's one of the early origins of groups of men getting together too and receiving pleasure from other men. Okay? Now, one thing you have to understand, and this goes out too to those cats who are having homosexual relations or same sex relations and don't feel that you are a same sex guy. All right? Now, one thing about males in the past as well as now, some men don't consider themselves gay if they're the one doing the penetrating, they're the ones getting sucked off. They will say that the one who's taking it is gay or homosexual because he's taking it in the way the woman would have to. Okay? Even though those same guys who don't consider themselves gay may so-called do a rim shot or whatever they call it these days, they still don't consider themselves gay. And to this day, you still have a lot of bathhouses all over the world. Even here in America, they just don't call them bathhouses because you say bathhouse, you're going to be like, oh, okay. Whole bunch of dudes sitting up in a place steamy and wet and glistening and all of this stuff. Ain't no women around? Yeah. So, so what happened? Here, everybody getting either their spiritual salvation or either their rocks off. Now, here's where the point in history where the church or Roman Catholics and the Christians come in. Now, they came in and they wished to conquer and take over anyone who did these practices, especially those who did it for spiritual implications or whatever. So the church comes in, takes over, and guess what? Now they doing it. Okay? Now, I'm sure some of you are very familiar with some of these very dark and sexual origins of the church, especially dealing with the Roman Catholics and the Christians. How not only did they have these things for themselves to have sex with women, they have sex with other men too. However, it was done under the confounds of the church, so it was okay. All right. Now, the people who weren't deemed worthy to be members of the church, okay, or who were captured and enslaved, the church used them as sexual slaves. They would sell them to other countries, other societies, other tribes, whatever. Okay, here's where it starts. Do your research. I did. So, from there, now you got the church capitalizing on sex, even though premarital sex is so-called a sin. Metaphysically speaking, what is meant by having sex before you're married is this. Before you can have an everlasting and harmonious relationship with someone outside of you, there has to be a divine marriage within oneself. Because, in so many words, if you go into a relationship not knowing all there is to know, you're going to attract an individual that's very much like you, and you're going to bring in offspring and progeny who reflect you, meaning born in sin, so to speak. So, with that being said, the marriage that is spoken of is not necessarily speaking of the physical one. It's speaking of the divine marriage of your so-called masculine, feminine, electric, and magnetic energies within yourself. Then you can have one with someone outside of yourself. Okay? And this is why at times certain people want deemed to have sex, and that's where the marriage license and all this stuff came in, to make sure that nobody was humping without the state or the church knowing about it, or the slave master in some respects. So prostitution had to go underground, and they resurfaced as what today we call whorehouses or brothels. And here's where we get into a very interesting point in history. I'm gonna drop some stuff on you too, okay, or hand you some stuff. I ain't gonna drop them, okay. Now, those of you that may know through research or even just looking at certain movies that involve whorehouses or brothels, you will always notice that the one who ran everything was a madam, usually a woman, a mistress, a female. And then sometimes you would have a male who often would dress up as a woman or drag, okay, to run this house. Why is that? You have to understand this metaphysically. In order to embrace and know how to control and enhance a particular energy, whether it's male or female, you have to embody that. So an instance, say the man dressing up in drag, acting as a madam. In order to be able to control and steer the feminine energy along certain lines, you have to be one with it. And one of the rituals that was done in order to be one with that energy was for the man to embrace the likeness of a woman, so to speak. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that he had to go have anal intercourse and have fellatio with another man. It didn't necessarily mean that, even though some societies or some tribes did do that, but not in this case, or not in this case. And so he would put on the dress or the robe, the wig, the makeup, or all the things that would make him look feminine, and this was how it was done. Now, the madam is also what we can call a pimp. Now, pay attention to your old black exploitation movies. And whenever you saw a pimp or someone who was able to control women or have women in his control, he always had a feminine disposition to him. Even if he didn't look exactly like a woman, he always had long flowing hair or locks, and he dressed in certain colors like lavender, violet. The reason why this was done is that same symbolism again. In order to be able to reign or to control the feminine in some way, you had to embrace it within yourself, as well with women who would dress, or what I think they call them drag kings, and women who would dress like men and pretend to act as men. It's the same thing. So this is why you saw this in the movies, and you also saw this in the past. One movie to see this in is, I think it's A Rage in Harlem. Forrest Whitaker, Gregory Hines. That's a good movie that can show you that example. Okay, so this is why that was done. Once the church got hip to it, they figured, okay, if there's going to be any prostitution, we're going to control it. By this time, all the ones who control the church are men. So from there, men started controlling prostitution with an overt masculine effect. You know, beating the women, threatening the women. Whereas when madams were running things, that didn't necessarily happen. Not saying that it didn't at some point, but it didn't happen like that. In order to control the feminine, you don't control the feminine by force. You control the feminine through charm. Negatively, to control the feminine, you use symbols, trinkets, money, currency. You use things to coerce the feminine. This is why money was the biggest exchange for sexual favors. I'll continue more in the next video. Hotel.